I'm going to talk a bit about working for VFX in games and specifically using real life example, an actual game. We're going to go through the menus. We're going to play test our VFX in a real context and see how that affects our work, and then talk about how we can improve the VFX, even like a bit, like improve the moment beyond just VFX work. Because obviously working in games is a very collaborative process. I mean, unless if you're a solo dev, of course, but in general, if you're in a studio, you'll be working with people, and collaboration is going to push the project even further. Here is the effect we're going to be looking at today. We're going to be tasked with adding a lightning strike VFX in a game where, like, basically this lightning strike can actually injure the player. So it's like it's a real game mechanic, and usually it'll be like a super cool VFX kind of in an isolated environment like this. And of course, that's a big part of the work, and it's really awesome. But it might be confusing. You might think, okay, so I just make my VFX and then that's it, you know? But in reality, that's not where the work ends. The vast majority of my career, I was always encouraged to actually play test the effect in the game, and you'll see how different it can feel and look once we test it out. Today, like I said, I want to use a real example. This game is called Let Them Come Onslaught. There's currently a demo available on Steam. So if you want to download it, you can give it a shot. You can even share feedback and help us out. It's a very arcadey game. You know, you go straight into action, you're shooting enemies. There's a lot of VFX, so you'll see why for us it felt like a fun project for us as a studio that mostly does VFX for games. Playtesting the game or playing the game is a big part of the job. I always try to play the game, get familiar with it, see how it feels, you know, what's the pace, what are the other VFX like, what's the art direction. So if we study this one a little bit, we can tell that there's some sort of HD retro look going on, like enemies are kind of pixel art, but there's also like some dynamic lighting effect. The VFX themselves, although the game has this retro feel, the VFX don't look particularly, you know, pixelated or retro. So there's this kind of, we know how this can affect our work. And I would say most of the VFX in this game, they're very snappy. They're not like ultra realistic. They're kind of in between, stylized with slightly realistic feel in some places. So all of this is going to help us working on like building up this VFX that we're tasked to work on. Of course, usually when you work in a studio, there would be an art director and a lot of people that would kind of give you tips on like the art direction that you're supposed to go for. But it's good to see it for yourself in context. Okay, so now we've seen what the game looks like and what we'll be working on. There's a very subtle rain going on right now. And as the game progresses, more and more enemies will spawn, gets harder and harder. But there's actually kind of a storm that will start appearing in the game. So eventually there's going to be mist, rain, lightning strike. So I'm not going to play until we reach that point, but basically that can help us get an idea of what we're working on. So this lightning strike that I was showing before is going to be used in that this storm sequence near the end of the game. And it can actually damage the player, like I said. Let's go over the elements that make this effect briefly. Again, for the sake of those of you who are maybe more new to the work of VFX artists, you're curious, how do you even make a VFX? Like, what is that? So right now we're in the particle system editor. In this editor, you can basically create different particle systems. And this is composed of a lot of particle systems. So we have a very useful tool here, which is this little guy icon, which can isolate a part of a VFX. So this is just like, you know, the main branch with a custom material that looks like this. And then we have some arcing electricity. So this is like a curved particle, like a curved texture or material. And these kind of slide on the ground from the point of impact. So that helps to give, you know, that little aftershock electric feeling. We have some lights and decals, which won't really show here in engine, but in the particle editor, but you will see them in game. Then we have sparks. So big bright sparks flying everywhere. We have debris to make it look like the ground is getting destroyed. We have a little shockwave. And these last two parts I think are very interesting. We have kind of this really hot core that is, you know, it's there for only like almost one frame. And you might almost think like, wow, like, was that even in there? Like we can barely see it. But here's where here's what's interesting. Like if you turn it off, you'll notice that like all of a sudden you can kind of see that the elements are not connected anymore. So that little super hot core, hot white core will help like to kind of blend. It really looks like the branch is connecting to the rest. Without it, the effect doesn't work nearly as well. And one final part that's interesting is this little haze here. Again, like if you take this off, all the colors, you know, the orange, the blue, the black from the debris, they all look like different, just clearly a bunch of different elements together, but like they're not really blending as well. If you add this haze, there's like this kind of blue tint that's going to bleed over everything from the center. It all makes it feel like it's a bit more real in a way. We want to test this lightning strike, but it happens late in the game. Like we have to survive in the demo like 12 minutes, and it's maybe halfway through that we start to see this lightning strike. So we don't want to play the game for 6 minutes every time we need to test our game. So usually talking with the programmers, we're going to see ways to kind of cheat in the game a little bit to access the VFX that we want to work on. So in this case here, we have what we call a weather sequence. So this little bar here, this little timeline, it starts at 0, it goes all the way to the end. That's like basically the duration of our game, the 12 minutes. And at first it starts with like nothing. But when we get here, we start to have like storm level 1. It's going to play a blueprint of kind of a storm starting to get more intense. And when we get all the way here, storm level 2 happens, which is even crazier and has like more lightning strikes and all that stuff. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring this way sooner like this, so that when we boot the game, it's like the rain starts like almost right away. And this little key over there is what affects the gameplay lightning strike. So in our case, this is the one that we want to test actually the most. The reason why I'm bringing both, because technically I could have just brought like just the gameplay lightning. The thing is, that wouldn't be a good representation of when this VFX plays, because this VFX only plays when there's a storm going on, either storm level 1 or storm level 2. So I want to match as closely as possible the look and the setting in which the effect is going to play. All right, so let's play again, and let's see. Now this lightning strike should happen really early in the level. There it is. So this is the gameplay version of the lightning strike. Okay, so it just landed right here. It's going to keep happening over and over. So this is like a gameplay mechanic that happens in the game. Like I said, it's kind of late game-ish, adding an extra layer of danger to the player, where this icon appears. You have a few seconds to step out of the way to not take damage. I could stand right in to see what happens if I do get hit. Ow. Okay. So, okay, now I'm looking at the VFX. I'm trying to be critical of it, like what we could do to improve it. And one thing I would say, I don't know if you're noticing, but it doesn't light up the screen a lot, okay? We have lightning strikes that are, cosmetic only. They're just lighting the whole scene. That represents a lightning strike that's happening like outside of the screen, and it lights the whole scene. But when a lightning strike hits near me, it barely lights the screen. So to me, that sounds like inverted a little bit. I would like the lightning strike that's hitting in-game to look much more powerful. And there's a few other things that we could, I think, tweak further. But let's start with just changing that. Let's just go into our VFX and see if we can make it like more crazy looking a little bit. And of course, this will depend on the art direction of the game and all that stuff. So one of the things I would like to add is we want to make the effect a bit more wild, like more bright, like it brightens your whole screen as if it's like almost blinding a little bit. So we're gonna add a post effect. Post effects, for those of you who don't know, it's basically like, it's like an effect that will affect your whole screen. So if there's like an explosion and you add kind of a glow post effect, it's gonna kind of glow like everywhere on your screen for the amount of time you want it to. So there's ways to do this directly in Unreal. For some reason, we did kind of a different setup here. I'm gonna show you, I won't go too much in detail because that's not necessarily the point of this topic, but what we did is we did a fake post effect. So you can see this big, bright, crazy flash. By the way, I know this big, bright flash looks like kind of too crazy here in the editor. It's been calibrated to look better like in-game. But this is like a fake post effect, if you will. It's actually a particle, but it knows where the camera is. So when the effect is playing, it's coming, like it's gonna attach itself to the camera, play over the whole camera. So it's just another way to do a post effect. And we can see it very easily in the particle system here. So we have this. Now I also wanted to add some extra spikes. So big, crazy spikes, okay? They actually look a bit wild like this, but from away, what we're doing is the effect is gonna be more bright and we were kind of losing a bit the bottom part of the effect. So with these little spikes, we kind of want to communicate that this is a dangerous area, like you can take damage. We're also going to add another layer of particles. So if you remember, we had like the kind of orange particles, but now we're adding like blue particles, and these ones, they go crazy far. So the idea here is we want this effect to feel like you see it almost no matter where it is. If this lightning strike is happening on one side of the screen and you're at the other side, I want particles to like kind of fly over and reach you still, so that you still feel that, wow, like this world is being affected by this lightning strike. And the final piece that we're gonna add is going to be another little shockwave. This one is kind of subtle, but it's like this little electric shockwave that you see here. So this was actually created for another effect. It was created for the electric grenade that you might have seen when I was playing. And what's cool is, I mean, big part of working in VFX for games is reuse, reuse, reuse whenever you can, for 3 reasons. First of all, it kind of helps with a cohesive look of your effects through the game. Because if you make a fire in your game and someone else makes a fire and someone else makes a fire and you're walking in a room and there's like three fires that look completely different, it's like, that's really weird. So you want to kind of stay consistent, but also we will, well, so it's going to be more efficient for the game, less textures, less materials, different materials to load. And for speed reason, if you reuse stuff that already exists, you can work faster as a team. So this electric shockwave came from another effect, but I thought, okay, let's add it here too to kind of make it connected in visual language for electricity. We can see already lightning strike looks like just much brighter. It's more visible, easier to see it happen. Another detail I didn't mention, like, so the lightning strike happens kind of late in the game. So later in the game, the screen is kind of filled with enemies. Right now, the screen is kind of empty, so maybe this lightning strike looks a bit like it stands out a little bit, but in context of a screen filled with enemies, it was actually easy to miss the impact, right? So now with these long spikes, even when it was surrounded, the spikes peek through the enemies and you can still see very well where the lightning landed. I'm going to try to move away to see like a bit what it could look like, but basically that gives you an idea. All right, so now I'm happy with the VFX itself, but there's some elements that we could improve a little bit. 2 things I would mention is the camera shake when it's landing. So you might notice when the lightning strike hits the ground, we have a camera shake, and the way camera shakes are done most of the time is kind of a sine logic handled in code where, you know, the camera is going to rotate with a certain sine frequency and strength. Both vertically and maybe a different sine logic for sideways. And together it looks like the camera is shaking, but it kind of looks like wobbly a little bit. To me, it looks a bit too soft and doesn't look like it's a harsh impact. Like I want more like a vibration. All right, so now you can see, you'll be able to hear a bit better what I meant with the lightning strike, sounding a bit distant maybe. And you're gonna see the difference when we try to get it to sound more punchy and sounding like it's hitting right next to you. Okay, so now we have kind of ideas to talk about with the team. So again, depending on the studio you work at and, you know, the reality of where you're working at, everything is a bit different, you know, use your own judgment. Maybe your team is in a big crunch and for some reason it's not super receptive to extra polish. That's possible, you know. Usually over the years when I was working, we would have kind of reviews together with different departments, and that's when you can kind of raise suggestions and topics. And what's cool with VFX is VFX come in pretty late in the game pipeline, right? Usually, you know, first there's an idea, then there's a design doc, then there's like concept arts, then artists are gonna make the visuals for the game, and then programmers are gonna integrate it, make it work. And usually that's when VFX are added and then sound. So like these are usually the last two steps, again, depending on which studio you're at. I just feel like it's the common order. So VFX artists, when you add your VFX, you kind of are in a privileged position where you can see this whole little moment come together. And it's a good time to maybe raise some questions or suggestions. Sometimes there needs to be some adjustments to animation after they see the VFX or vice versa. So anyways, in our case, we're gonna talk with our sound artist, and I'm gonna dig a bit through the project to show you how, again, for those of you who are kind of new to this. So in Unreal Engine, there's a really amazing feature where, let's say this is my lightning strike and I've made this VFX, but I want to see other places in the game where this is being used. So you can go to Asset Reference Viewer and see this really awesome window. So basically this in the middle is the VFX, the file that I'm working on, the VFX in this case. To the right is going to be all the elements that make this effect. So if you're looking for something like one of the material or texture that's being used, you can kind of find it. But on the other side here, this is going to be where my VFX is used. So it's used in two blueprints, and one of them is called Test. So you can kind of guess, well, maybe that's not the one. So this one is environment lighting, sorry. So I'm going to edit this one, and here we have the blueprints. Blueprints, if you don't know, it's kind of code, but it's a visual scripting tool. So instead of everything being like just lines of code, like, okay, on event removal, play the lightning strike VFX, but the location has to be 75 units lower in the Z-axis. Like normally that would all be typed up, but now it's just like all these nodes are very easy for an artist to understand. So it's good knowledge, you know, if VFX artist, you might need some time to work with blueprints too. So it's cool to kind of know a bit your way around more than just the particle system. And here we can see that the audio is being played. So here we have like kind of a temp lightning sound that we were using. I'm going to raise the volume a bit so you can hear. I don't know if you can hear well. But it's a lightning strike that sounds a bit distant, right? Maybe that was super loud. I don't know. So, okay, that's cool. Basically, we talked about it with our sound designer and went ahead and made this super cool variations, like 4 lightning strike sounds. And in this sound cue, the game will randomly pick one of them every time it plays. So if I play it now, what's cool with this is, yeah, there's a bit of variety, so it's not always the same lightning sound happening over and over. and the random here is getting picked up. And then there's a modulator. This is a nice little tool too as well for sound artists in games. So like we can have some variation of pitch and volume. So even if the same version of the lightning sound plays twice, it can still have variety and sound higher pitch, lower pitch. So all of this will make the whole thing sound way more organic. So if we go back here in the environment lightning blueprint, I'm gonna swap the old lightning sound for the new lightning sound, and we should see a difference right away. Let me see how I'm doing for time. Okay, good. So the other thing that I want to tweak is again, actually, I'm just showing you how to tweak it. It's depending on your studio. For us here at Tuatara, we're kind of like a small indie team working on this game specifically. So programmers are actually fine with a VFX artist just doing something like that. But it's not always the case, right? I've worked in other studios where it was pretty strict. Like as a VFX artist, you can't even touch shaders sometimes if like they're really worried about performance issues and stuff like that. So always use your own judgment and ask around like if it's okay to do stuff like that. But in our case, the programmers are like, yeah, please go ahead, because they were busy creating new systems. So they built the previous systems so that artists can easily tweak things themselves. So the last thing we're going to tweak is the camera shake. Here we go, camera shake. So I had to ask the programmers where it was in this case, and it was here in the same blueprint. If we go down, we can find the BP cam shake large, and with this one, we can actually find it here. So here it is. Can open it. And it's going to be a bunch of values of oscillation, duration, blend time. And I won't go super into detail into this, but basically you tweak those values to make it like move more or less or slower or faster. But let's say I ask the programmer, hey, is it okay if I change the cam shake? He's like, yeah, totally. But then again, when I was showing you this trick to use the reference viewer, you might want to check that out again, because if I just change the values here, this cam shake might be used elsewhere in the game, and it actually totally is. So here we have our cam large shake, and it's being used in a bunch of other moments in the game, even in the intro when like the big claw is hitting the ship and all that stuff. So that's, I don't want to start messing with this and maybe mess up other cam shakes that were totally fine. It's just for the lightning strike specifically, I think it should look a bit different. So what we're going to do is we right click on this and we make a duplicate. And this time I called it BP cam shake large, but I added sharp at the end. So there's a new version. I tweaked the values and make it like much more aggressive and intense. And again, like we can still tweak it now that it's its own thing and it's only used there. We can adjust it as much as we need. Here we go. All right. So I don't know if you could hear correctly. I'm trying to put the volume not too loud, but hopefully you hear it more now than it was before. And now we also have like cam shake and everything, a bit more strong. And again, like I said, like this moment right now is not like fully representative of when this lightning strike appears. But when it's late game, it's full of enemies, like we really kind of sell this moment. So yeah, that's kind of a little overview of what it can be like. This process is kind of common. You make your VFX in the particle system, but then you test it a lot and tweak things and make sure it looks right, and chat with other departments to make sure that it's what they needed. And basically, yeah, it's really awesome to work in VFX for games. I think it's really special because like often like departments are working on stuff for a while, like let's say you have a game where your character is running around and jumping, and for the longest time it's just like a bit dry. And when you come in as a VFX artist and you add like little puffs of smoke when you jump and like little dashing effects and stuff like that, it really sells the moment. And usually, if you do a good job, the whole team is pretty happy. So It's a great job. It's awesome. I hope you learned something today. We can't thank you enough for joining, for donating, and see you next time.